Work hard, save wisely, and you'll get ahead. To a lot of people, that capitalist promise is starting to feel like a con. The wealth gap is expanding, student debt is ballooning, and affordable housing is a relic of the past. So is capitalism failing today's youth? I'm Melinda Nusafora, and you're watching Counterpoints. For most of the 20th century, each generation was more prosperous than the one before it, until now. In the US, the top 1% of earners now hold about a third of the country's collective wealth. In the UK, the richest 10% hold more than half the national wealth. So is it any wonder that millennials are starting to explore other economic models? You only have to look at the results of the New York City mayoral election to see it playing out in real time.
It's satisfying to see someone my age same beliefs as me, who wants to make it more affordable in New York City.
We're going to make the city affordable. We're going to have free buses. We're going to have free childcare. It actually feels like somebody who lives here and feels our struggle.
And it's not just a New York City phenomenon. A recent Gallup poll found that although capitalism does remain more favourable among Americans than socialism, that gap is narrowing. Today, 54% favoured it over socialism compared to 60% in 2021. The image of socialism, however, has remained steady. Billionaire Peter Thiel appears to have foreshadowed this trend back in 2020. An email he sent to Meta executives has gone viral again, warning corporate America that while socialism may not be the answer, young people are fed up with crony capitalism. On this episode of Counterpoints, we'll ask, has capitalism failed today's youth? Is this a worrying development? And we throw our panel a curveball and ask, should billionaires even exist? Well, joining us for this program is Fiona Lali, a political activist who is a member of the British Revolutionary Communist Party. And also on our panel is Charlie Mullins, an entrepreneur and businessman who founded and was the CEO of Pimlico Plumbers. We appreciate both of you here on Counterpoints. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, an email from billionaire venture capitalist Peter Thiel, the one he wrote back in 2020, is doing the rounds again. He wrote what now seems to be quite a prolific email to Facebook execs, urging them to take young people's attraction to socialism seriously. He said, and I quote, "When 70% of millennials say they're pro-socialist, we need to do better than simply dismiss them by saying they're stupid and entitled or brainwashed. We should try and understand why." Charlie, this was back in 2020. Is it that young people want socialism, or are they just becoming more and more jaded by capitalism?
Well, I actually think that they actually want it more, the socialism. I think the fact that, they've had probably a fairly luxurious life, a sport life, an entitled life. Not all of them, of course, but I think the fact that they don't need to work so much, they're less inclined to sort of support the capitalism. And I feel that they've just become into a sort of area where they feel that it's unnecessary. They just go with the flow. They're being given too many handouts, being given too much help. And, in a way, I think they're playing the victim. I know this is not what this Peter Thiel thinks or doesn't want us to be saying, but I honestly feel it's to do with that. And I think technology hasn't helped it. I think that's made it so much simpler for them to go that route and not go the route of becoming a business person or creating sort of more work and creating more wealth. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Fiona, what's your take? Is it that young people have had too many handouts, they've had it easy. Technology has made life easy for us, and maybe now they're being attracted to socialism, whereas perhaps capitalism is what got them the good life, as Charlie describes it.
Yeah. To be honest, I almost don't even feel the need to make an argument based on what Charlie just said, because I think it really represents just how out of touch the ruling class and much of the establishment and millionaires are with young people today, and not only their lives, but also the mood that exists amongst young people. I mean, this is the first generation that is going to be worse off than their parents. Young people are saddled with debt by the time they get into their mid-20s. The thought of buying a house is a far-off dream for so many people. Lots of young people are putting off and not even considering having kids because of the cost of living crisis. I mean, it's just extraordinary to suggest that young people are looking towards socialism just because they're living a life of luxury. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the fact that capitalism has produced so much inequality in their own lives here in the West, but also around the world through war and genocide and imperialism. That's making young people think this system is sick and I want an alternative. And so many of them are looking to socialism, and even beyond socialism, they're looking to communism and communist ideas because they want something fundamentally different than what capitalism has to offer them, because it's offering them nothing and definitely not a future.
Charlie, jump in here. What do you make of that?
I think it's very rude of what she said that I'm out of touch. I run a plumbing empire, which I sold to the Americans for 150 mil. I've started up a new business called...
I think that makes you out of touch.
No, just listen to me, bear me out, and you're telling me I'm out of touch. You know, what we need to do is encourage more people into the workplace, encourage more people to create wealth, and everybody benefits from it. But unfortunately, we've made life too simple for many people. But for you to say that, honestly, I mean, in the UK, that would be laughable to say that to somebody like me. I mean, it's like, you know, what the child that I come from was from nothing. And, you know, I've done very well, fortunately, in my life. And a lot of people have benefited by me doing well. And I think you'll find that the more people that become like into capitalism will help to create more people to come away from the socialism side of it. But I know you're nodding your head and, you know, we can disagree politely, but one of us is wrong and it's not me.
I think when 8 people own as much wealth as half of the whole planet, of half of the world, it's ridiculous to suggest that you can just work a bit harder in the system and make it somewhere. The system is fundamentally rigged against the working class in particular. You might have had one individual journey, and maybe you think you're very special and very unique as a product of that. But the majority of people today, their lives are getting harder. Inequality is growing. The gap between the rich and the poor is the highest it has ever been. And that, by the way, is what produces all of this extraordinary wealth. First of all, it's workers themselves that produce the wealth in society, but it's the capitalists at the top that hoard that wealth for themselves. That's why you're selling companies for 150 million pounds or whatever it is you just said, right? That doesn't then sprinkle down to other ordinary people. Actually, people's conditions are getting harder. And I think for a lot of young people, they don't buy into this idea that, yeah, if I just keep going, things will be easier. To buy a house, I'm going to have to pay on average 6 times more than my parents did to buy a house. Where am I going to get that money from? It's not coming from massive increases in wages. I'm spending most of my money actually on rent in order to live in London. You don't live in London, I think, as you've already said so.
Well,
so how are young people supposed to get?
I still respect where I live, but you said the houses are 6 times more, but they're probably earning 8 times more. And to say that you can't buy an house now, there's many people, young people I know that get off their backsides, they go out there and they make it happen. And you know, technology should be helping people now. You know, you can sit at home, you can sell property from all over the world. They haven't even got to move out of their house. And you're telling me that it's harder for these people to try and do well in life and buy an house and better themselves. But, you know, I'm going to disagree with you. You know, a lot of this, you know, I believe is about lazy people that are not prepared to put themselves out, and the opportunities are out there. But unfortunately, we pay too many people to sit at home and do nothing.
Well, you can believe what you want, but the facts are the facts about the conditions that young people find themselves in today and why it's so much harder for them to get ahead. And I just think what you're saying and the attitude that's coming across, look, in the past, there was a lot of propaganda about socialism and communism as this dangerous thing, and the ruling class invested so much in it to make sure that young people didn't become socialists and they didn't become communists. But we're living in a time now where more and more people are identifying with that word. In fact, last weekend in London, I just spoke at a meeting of over 1,000 communists in central London, the majority of whom under the age of 30 in the room. And that is because of the conditions of capitalism today. And it's because of people like you. You're actually creating more socialists with everything you're saying. When you say things like, you're all just lazy, all of you should just work a bit harder.
All of
when
you
people,
are lazy.
even
I said
at
there's a certain amount of
university, are working multiple jobs. It's just ludicrous in compared to like what
the way you're saying it,
experiencing.
You're trying to knock wealthy people, or let's call them job creators or investors or people that train people or people that get them into a job. Why call them rich people? Why not just call them job creators, wealth creators, rather than knocking people?
I'll call them parasites.
We knock successful people, and the people that knock them are socialists. And because they're not prepared to go out and make it happen. And you're smiling, and I find it quite amusing also. But I don't think it's a funny thing. I think we need to find a solution to help it. If we carry on, if we don't encourage capitalism, then it's us lot that are paying for the socialism. It's us that are paying.
You said that we need to find a solution, Charlie. So I'm curious what you think as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. Do you think that socialism will solve the problems that Fiona has identified, this idea of not being able to afford a home, being worse off than their parents? Do you think that socialism could improve the situation for some young people?
Well, I'm sure it can be improved, but what I'm trying to say is that if you're giving people money for doing nothing, they all want to join the club and take the easy route out. So, you know, it's just as difficult for years, you know, that you couldn't buy an house years ago. You had to change and work differently. But, you know, I honestly believe that the technology has made things worse. I think people just prepare to sit at home more. And, you know, to start knocking people that have put something back into society, paid a lot of tax and helped many people, I think it's the wrong way to be knocking. Why would you penalise successful people? I just don't understand that.
Do you pay a lot of tax? Do you pay a lot of tax, Charlie?
Sorry? Do I pay a lot of tax?
Do you pay a lot of tax?
I paid in
because actually the richest.
Paid in. Let me answer your question, lady. I paid in over £100 million in tax in my lifetime on a personal basis. So maybe that answers your question.
Okay, because
that's a lot of money, Fiona. I mean, he's contributing to a welfare system in the UK that does support a lot of people. I mean, his tax probably have a lot of benefits to people back in the United Kingdom.
It's, at the end of the day, it's a drop. £100 million is a drop in the ocean in terms of what Britain actually needs to provide a decent standard of living for all people in society. We don't need to go into the specific financial details of Charlie. I made that comment because on my brief research about him before this, he was talking about moving abroad precisely to avoid labour, avoid potential taxes on rich people in society, which is what the super rich tend to do, which is what billionaires tend to do. They avoid that as much as they can because they hoard all of the wealth in society that could be used for the needs of society. I mean, we talked about what is the solution to inequality. I think all of us would agree that there's a crisis in society right now. socialism is about having an economy that is planned on the basis of need and not profit, so that we invest into the sectors that need that support, like the NHS. The fact that the NHS right now has about 100,000 missing vacancies in it because the conditions are so bad, because the pay is so low. That is an anarchic, irrational system. We should have an economy, I would say, that's planned so that we get the right training for the right jobs where we actually need it, not on where some people can just suddenly make super profits in society. That's how capitalism is organized. That's why so much is invested in the arms industry, for example, where people can now make super profits off the back of war, of destruction, of genocide. I think that's an extreme system, actually. As a socialist, as a communist, I often get accused of having extreme views. I think it's much more extreme to defend the inequality that capitalism is producing today and the horrors that it is producing. So yeah, I would say socialism is the solution to the crisis that we're currently living through.
Charlie, I'll get your response to that, and then I've got a second question for you, Fiona.
Yeah. Well, look, not all business people hold back and avoid taxes. Many, like myself, that are paid into the system, and without it, you wouldn't have the socialism that you've got. So, again, I think you're unfairly knocking people that have contributed quite a lot to it. And if I'm being honest, it's typical of a lot of people that are socialism or socialists like yourself that knock people that are contributing to it. I mean, we all need to work together with that, we know. And you said people need to be paid more, and I agree with you, but they can only be paid more by business people creating a business, creating jobs, training people and paying into the system. So, you know, one doesn't work without the other. And I feel, you know, as much as, you know, I hear what you're saying, of course I do. But unfortunately, you know, the situation is getting worse. We need to find an answer to it. And the answer to it is getting people into the workplace and contributing. That's the answer.
Fiona, let me put this to you. So if we, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility in the UK, the top 10% of contributors, or of taxpayers, of earners, contribute approximately 60% of all tax revenue in the UK. So when you consider that, and then you look at perhaps how capitalism, socialism has failed in certain countries. I use examples such as Venezuela or Cuba. When you look at that system and then you compare it to the United Kingdom, where you have 10% of people contributing 60% of the tax revenue, give us your thoughts on why you think that that's a worse system than what's operating in, say, Cuba or Venezuela.
Well, first of all, I'd say Cuba and Venezuela have also been victims of Western imperialism, and particularly American imperialism, that has strangled the revolutions that took place in those countries and made the conditions in those countries extremely difficult. And they're getting worse every single day. And just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Trump making more statements about his intentions in Venezuela. If we want to discuss what happened in Venezuela and Cuba, that would be a whole discussion in and of itself in terms of the process that has happened there. But if we just focus on Britain for a moment, I think, look, the point is this. What I'm fighting for is not just more of a kind of super wealth tax on the super rich, which is an idea that's put out, I think also by different left-wing MPs have put this out, the Green Party and Jeremy Corbyn, people like this have advocated for a wealth tax, right, on the highest earners in society. And sure, I support that, but realistically speaking, the way in which capitalism functions, I'm a communist, right? So I'm fighting for a world, for a society without bosses, without landlords. I think that workers should take control over their own workplaces. I think that workers are the people who produce wealth in society. I don't think it's the bosses, the CEOs who just produce all of the jobs and we should thank them for that. No, it's workers who are contributing the most, and therefore there should be democratic control over how all of that, how the workplace actually looks like, how our resources are allocated in society. Obviously, what I'm arguing for is a fundamental transformation of how the economy and our society is organized. And that's very different from just a wealth tax here or there.
Charlie, you're saying you want more people in the workplace. So if Fiona is saying, you know, workers want to take more responsibility, more ownership for their work, could that not perhaps encourage more people to be engaged if they felt more ownership of the work they were doing?
Well, look. Obviously, all workers should be treated with respect and paid accordingly to what they contribute. I'm all for higher wages, but for that to happen, you know, the people like myself have got to invest money in a business and make it happen. And you say, you know, not all workers are treated disrespectfully. Some are paid very well, many are, and you know, they buy their own house and they have a wonderful life out of it. So I think you're really sort of, what's the word? You're knocking the thing that's actually creating the wealth and saying that these people are not paying their fair share. But without bosses and without capitalism, then you lot would have no money. Basically, you'd have a lot less money than what you've got now by knocking people to go to work. And I just think, look, we'd love to resolve the problem, but you will never resolve the problem while you are giving people money for doing nothing. You will never resolve that problem. The UK economy is in a big mess at the moment. Why? Because we've got more people taking out of the pot than putting in the pot. You know, people have got to contribute to make the things better all the way around. But the way you're sort of wording it, it's like as if we're rivals and enemies. And you believe me, most bosses, they respect their workers, they pay them well because they know that everybody benefits from it.
Fiona?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I would say we are enemies. I would say that we are living through a class war, and class war is necessary. And I think the idea that we can all be friends and come and sit around the table as though there's an equal relationship between a boss and a worker is fundamentally false. We fundamentally disagree. And that's because you're speaking from the point of view of the ruling class, of the capitalists, and I'm speaking from the point of view of the working class, within which there is a fundamentally exploitative relationship where workers are forced. You have to have a job, obviously, in order to live, in order to pay your rent or a mortgage or food on the table, all of these kind of things, right? You have no say over what your wages are, what those conditions are. The only time workers can improve their lives is through things like strike action, is through collective struggle and collective bargaining. I support that because it's the only way in which workers are able to gain some power over the situation that they find themselves in. The suggestion that we can all come around the table and agree and be friends is so out of odds with the reality of the situation and the reality of the relationship. It might not feel nice to you as a boss, the idea that workers don't like you, but it's not really about you or your personality. It's not even about you as an individual, to be honest. What I'm talking about is the whole system and the way the system is set up. And I think a lot of people feel, you were talking about how we need more people who contribute than take away. But that's exactly what billionaires are. That's exactly why billionaires are the problem, because they sit at the top of society, amassing this huge amount of wealth that no one needs at all. And they don't put it back into the economy. They don't put it into things that we need, like the NHS, which is grotesquely underfunded, which leads to deaths, which leads to problems in people's lives. They don't put it into what they actually need. They put it into their own little projects where they can make more money off of money. That's why I call it parasitical. This is a crazy system, and people die as a result, and that is irrational, and it makes me angry. But also from a logical point of view, that seems like a totally the worst possible way for us to organize our society. And I think there's a lot of young people in particular today that are questioning that. Why do we live in a society where there's billionaires and homeless people on the street? Why is that necessary? when we
We're
actually
going to
have
come
the resources in
We're going to
society
come specifically to
to feed
billionaires shortly, Fiona. So I'm just going to put a pin in that answer for you, Charlie, and I'm going to get you to respond to some of Fiona's points when we come more specifically to billionaires in just a moment. But Charlie, I want to ask you this. Universities were free or almost free in the UK until 1998 and in Australia until 1989. So haven't a whole generation already benefited from one of the pillars of socialism that's now been taken away and forced many young people into student debt?
Yeah, look, again, I think they've been directed down the wrong route. I think they've been directed to university, which in a lot of cases has been unnecessary. They're not getting the jobs that they've trained for. They've wound up getting a load of debt. We just need to be more realistic and direct people into the jobs that are out there for them and not the jobs that they think they're entitled to. I mean, a lot of the people, like the millennium people that was pushed into university, it's come unstuck now because no longer is the degree, the value of what they set out to be. They expected this is going to be all and end all. And, you know, we've gone the wrong way about pushing youngsters into a certain area. And unfortunately, I'm going to go back to what I say. Too many of them feel that they're entitled to get more for doing nothing. And you said something about bosses and workers and, you know, having a better relationship. You can have a better relationship, but you're either a worker or a boss. You can't be the both. You know, you can't have the tail wagging the dog kind of thing. So, you know, I think you're saying about better relationship. Well, that's wonderful, but don't ever run away with the idea that your staff can call the shots and run the show. Because if they could, they would be the boss and you'd be the worker.
Would they, Fiona? I mean, leadership is important, is it not?
Yeah, and what I'm arguing is that I think most workers know better than their boss the best way to run their own workplace. That applies to the organization of it, the health and safety rules, all of these things. If you go to many workplaces, most people will talk, they know what they're doing, and then the boss comes in and says a few different things. I mean, this is the point. We're coming at this, we are diametrically opposed, because you obviously think that bosses are the most intelligent, needed people to run certain companies.
I never said that at all.
I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that workers, and that's what I'm fighting for. That's what I support.
I never said that.
Workers control.
Look, I never said that at all. But for you to come up with the workers are more knowledgeable and more intelligent and more better than the boss, I mean, that is absolutely rubbish. Why are they not the boss then?
Because of the way that capitalism is set up.
The difference is I got up and was prepared to go to work and work hard and invest my money and create a business and get 500 people into work, 1,200 apprentices, and I've got someone like yourself telling me that I've got it wrong. Well, I haven't got it wrong.
Fiona, do you think if Charlie's saying he hasn't got it wrong, capitalism has been blamed perhaps for a host of perceived problems, even if they aren't the root cause of them? I mean, young people are disgruntled by the current system. They say it's broken. But is capitalism really the root cause of all those issues? I mean, Charlie's arguing it isn't. Is that just the brush that it's being painted with? And that's why we're seeing this groundswell at the moment.
Yeah, I think capitalism is the source of the problems in people's lives, because fundamentally it's down to how the economy is organized, right? We agree, obviously, we live in a capitalist system where production is done on the basis of profit and not need. That is what drives capitalism forward, right? The reason that as a boss, you're investing in certain things is in order for you to make a profit. You're not doing it just out of the goodness of your heart. You're looking to make profits, right? And it's that drive to profit which means that we then live in a very unbalanced economy where, as I said earlier, you have things like the NHS, education, these really important sectors are underfunded and right now are failing because under the laws of the capitalist system, it's not useful for them to invest in that. Even though if you were thinking about it from a long-term perspective for capitalism, you'd want a healthy, educated workforce. But that's a separate question. I can't talk about the logic of the capitalist class in 2025, which seems to have gone out the window. But the point is this: I think young people today can see that it's the system as a whole that is the source of their problems. It's not just one boss who's particularly nasty or particularly mean, which is a good thing, I would say, that it's not about individuals. It's about the way in which this economy is organized, and people want an alternative to that, and a radical alternative to that as well. It's very hard when your life and the life of your friends and your colleagues is getting harder and harder. Meanwhile, we can see that the life of the super rich is getting better, and that you can't hide that in society. That as the rich get richer, the rest of us are getting poorer. That's a fact of life under capitalism today. And so, what else would people blame their problems on? Well, I guess Charlie would say people aren't working hard enough, but I think if you're a nurse in the NHS struggling to get by because your ward doesn't have enough doctors, doesn't have enough staff, there's loads of patients coming in, the idea that you should just work harder to make your life better, I think it's an insult, and not just to NHS staff.
Yeah, that's not exactly what I meant, and you know that. You're using the term NHS a lot on the sympathy vote. You said about bosses, they make profit, as if it's a bad word. I mean, that's why you open a business, for profit. And again, many people benefit from that. But, you know, of course we need more money into the NHS, but the only way you're going to get that is more capitalism, more people creating wealth, more people contributing into society, but instead of draining society. So, you know, I feel that, you know, you when you talk about, you know, profits, you say it as if it's a bad word. I mean, what bit of rich makes you most annoyed, the word rich? What bit of that annoys you the most?
What annoys? I don't understand the question, sorry.
Look, I know it's not a difficult question, but you seem to be very annoyed by the word rich. Why does that annoy you?
Yeah. Well, I'm a communist. I'm opposed to the super rich hoarding all of the wealth in society. And you're saying, oh, the way to save the NHS is more capitalism. What that means today in Britain is privatization, because some people can see that the NHS is falling apart, and you've got American companies in particular that are going in and they've already begun privatizing different aspects of the NHS, which means that it's going to be harder for people to get the healthcare that they need. We're going to have to start paying for certain aspects of healthcare.
Yeah,
do you think that's going to make? Do you think that's going to make people in Britain
bosses
more healthy?
Job creators because of that. You've got to blame the government for the system that they're not running correctly. I mean, you can't, you know, why keep blaming successful people that have created jobs, that are training people, that are putting money back into society? And they're not all greedy people. I mean, I've probably given more money away than you know, probably what you, I don't know, earned kind of thing. You know, so I just feel that...
You've got a lot more to give.
I'll be honest. Well, but you laugh as if it's a joke, but it's obviously not a joke, because a lot of youngsters' future is at stake here, and we need to resolve the problem. And the way to resolve the problem is to get people into the workplace and look after them and make sure they get a good living, and we all contribute.
So, Charlie, are you saying that if people just work harder, they'll be able to get ahead?
No, I never said that. I think it'd be a good start if people just worked. You know, we've got a lot of people that are milking the system. But you're going like that as if I'm talking rubbish. I know. I mean, we know there's many people that are on the benefit system that don't need to be. Anybody that needs to be with mental health issues, general disabilities, or caring for people, we should give them all the help possible. But the lazy people that can work and won't work, they're the ones that are causing the problem.
Fiona, are they? I mean, if those people were in the workforce contributing taxes, wouldn't that make things a bit better off?
Of course, people want to work. People want to work. In fact, youth unemployment is growing at the moment. In Britain at the moment, youth unemployment is about 12%. And that's also because what you have, especially for young people when they graduate university, I read something recently that showed loads of the jobs that people apply to on Indeed, they're not even real jobs. It's like AI harvesting data, right? And for like tens of thousands of jobs, there's like 1 million applicants because people are desperately searching for work. The idea that the problems of young people not right now is the result of them being lazy. As I said at the beginning, I think it's really out of touch with the mood and the anxiety that young people have. I mean, you brushing this off, and it's not just you, it's other media commentators about young people. It's just mental health. It's all made up. Gen Z, they don't want to work hard. I think it's out of touch with the mood, and it's a contempt, actually. And by the way, that contempt is why people don't like the rich, as you put it, or you said why are you so annoyed at the rich? Why are you so annoyed at successful people? It's because the way in which you patronize people into believing that if everyone just worked a bit harder, they could get ahead in the system. And I'm telling you, everyone is working very hard and they're not getting ahead.
Well, they're not.
Because of the system.
Clearly they're not.
Rigged in the way
Clearly
that it is.
Not. Yeah, look again, I'm all for getting people into work, and I hate it when people are not working and they're draining off the system. And, obviously you have this issue with somebody that's done well in life or somebody that's rich, but them people without them, the socialism side of things will be a lot worse off. So I think we need to encourage people to do well and to put more back into society rather than sitting back, belly aching about we ain't got a job, we ain't got this, we haven't got this, we haven't got that. It's out there. The work is out there. And unfortunately, you've got many people that are just prepared to sit back and take and not contribute.
Can I say, I think you consider things like the welfare state as just an example of socialism, which I would say it isn't. But the point is, today, under capitalism, that welfare state is being attacked. It's being mauled. In fact, the logic of capitalism means that they want to cut any aspects of the welfare that still exist to pay for militarism, because the ruling class, particularly across Europe and in the West, want to spend loads of money on the army so that they can continue their imperialist exploits all around the world. So you seem to think that people like socialism because they've had it too good for too long. It's the opposite. People like socialism because capitalism is producing horror. It's producing austerity in their own lives. And it's also producing horror in other parts of the world. And so that's why people are moving towards social state.
You're asking me a question and you're answering it for me. So you're wrong, basically. You're saying some of the things you're saying. I'm all for getting people into work. I'm all for helping people, but they have to help themselves. And the NHS system, of course, it needs much more money. But unless you get people that are prepared to come away from being a socialist and start going out there and creating a job and creating wealth, not all businesses and wealthy people are bad people, but majority I know are very good people, and they actually help to get things going. So I feel that so somehow you've got it in your mind that it's a terrible thing to be successful.
OK, that's probably a good point for me to circle back to some of the points that Fiona made earlier that I said I would allow you to respond to, Charlie, because I want to talk specifically about billionaires and the ultra-rich, because there's no doubt we live in very contradictory times, as our debate this evening is evidence of. It doesn't just feel like the rich are getting richer. They actually are. An Oxfam report found that globally billionaire wealth grew by $2 trillion in 2024. And that is particularly troubling to some people because during that same time, according to the World Bank, the people living in poverty, that number barely moved. There are others, some leading economists, who have argued that billionaires are vital to the economy because they're innovators, they're employers, and they've revolutionised our societies and improved the way we live. So there's two sides to this very lucrative coin here. So Charlie, let me ask you, and also in response to what Fiona was saying a little bit earlier in our debate, should billionaires exist?
Of course. Yeah, of course it should. You know, undoubtedly. I mean, you know, again, a billionaire is not a terrible word. I mean, it's a wonderful thing if you are a billionaire, and imagine how much you put back into society by becoming a billionaire.
Fiona, when you look at the innovation, when you look at the employment that billionaires have been able to produce, if you look at someone like Bill Gates, the development of the desktop computer. I mean, he's a billionaire, but there's no doubt he's changed the way society works. People work, people can engage in education and the workforce. Is there a place for them in society?
No, I would say billionaires should not exist at all. But it's not just about them as individuals. Billionaires are a reflection of the capitalist system and the fact that it's dependent on the massive amounts of accumulation at one pole and absolute poverty, as you said, and degradation at the other pole. I mean, Charlie said it must be a wonderful thing to be a billionaire. Yeah, I'm sure it is. To be Jeff Bezos, I'm sure he has a lovely life. You know who doesn't have a lovely life is all of the workers who are exploited in Amazon warehouses across the world, who he tries to stop from organizing when they do to improve their conditions. His super wealth comes off the back of their super exploitation. That one thing you were saying earlier, the two things are related, the boss and the worker. Yeah, they are related. The boss can only exist off of the exploitation of the workers that the boss has. But I'm saying that workers could run those workplaces themselves because, of course, we need valuable things in society, valuable products, whether it's in technology or any other industry. But it's not just the innovation of one individual. Everyone knows that most products are the combined effort of many different people, of many different forms of work as well, and supply chains all over the world. Billionaires shouldn't exist because what they do is hold things back, actually. And I think there's actually a fear growing in some billionaires. I mean, didn't we start this program with a quote from one of them talking about maybe capitalism isn't working for young people? There's a few billionaires out there who even say maybe we should be taxed a little bit more. You know why? Because they're scared of this mood, this revolutionary mood that's growing in society. And you look at some countries like Bangladesh, like Sri Lanka, like Nepal, where you're seeing revolutions take place against the super rich, against the corrupt. And I think in the West now, some of them are looking at that and are worried. They're worried that that mood of anger exists here as well, because people are thinking, why should anyone be able to have all of that wealth? They shouldn't. And it's a reflection of the system, I would say.
And Charlie, I mean, we're also seeing that in the capitalist capital in New York City. Should multimillionaires and billionaires be worried? Do you think there's a groundswell, like what Fiona is saying? Is the time up?
I don't think there's time up at all, and I think it's wrong to say that all bosses are exploiting their workers. I mean, you know, I'm sure it happens in a minority of them, but most bosses look after their workers. You know, I run a business for 41 years before I sold it to the Americans, and you wouldn't be able to survive in the business if you exploited your workers. So to bring that in against successful people, I think it's just wrong again. And I think, if I'm being honest, I think that you just have this in your mind that, you know, being a socialist is the right thing. I mean, what motivates you? What motivation do you have being a socialist? Well, what motivation have you got then? Is it that you want to go round and have an argument on an interview or a disagreement and prove that wealthy people are not no value, and you know the fact that we pay more tax than anybody? You know, all I get from you is the idea that so anybody that's prepared to create jobs and train people and put money back into the country, you seem to dislike. I mean, what do you think should happen then? Maybe you're that clever. Maybe you know the answer.
Fiona?
I think we need a revolution. I think we need a revolution against the billionaires and the whole of the capitalist system. What motivates me is supporting workers in their struggle against the capitalists and against the system that is producing horror, that's producing cuts and also genocide and war abroad. That's what motivates me. And the best thing, from my perspective, is that what I find when I'm having discussions with people, I've just done a university tour called Why You Should Be a Communist. I've met hundreds of students talking to them about their anger at the capitalist system and why I think socialism and communism is the alternative. More people today are open to these ideas than even 10 years ago. That mood is growing. It's growing in society. And I would even say, I mean, it's not because I'm doing nice speeches. The reason that people are thinking this way is because of the massive events that are happening in their lives already, right? It's not me who's making their rent super high and their landlord is hiking it up every time their yearly contract goes up, right? It's not me who's raising the cost of all the food in Tesco or Sainsbury's or wherever they're trying to do their shopping. It's not me who's raised the cost of train travel in Britain, so it's hundreds of pounds just to go between different cities. That is the result of the capitalist system, the ruling class, and the bosses who are raking in off the back of everyone else's misery. That is creating socialists. That is creating communists. And as I said before, it's not about their personal feelings to any one individual. If anything, that would be good for the capitalist system, because then you could get rid of one individual at the top and that would change it all. But that's not enough. We're not after individuals. We're after the whole class basis of society itself. And that's what's got to be the focus, in my opinion.
Charlie, I want to ask you... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, why didn't you answer the question that I asked you instead of waffling on about what you just did?
Repeat the question.
Well, you avoided the question.
I think you don't like my answers.
What is the motivation in being a socialist? And you went on about...
I just told you. It's my motivation in being a socialist is the liberation of the working class from the horrors of exploitation that capitalism produces, so that you don't have to go to work and hope that your boss is going to pay you a decent wage so that you can feed your family. It's so that you don't have to worry about that anxiety. So you've got a guaranteed place to live. There's guaranteed healthcare, that your life isn't down to the whims of the market and what it's going to produce in your life. That's my motivation as a socialist. It's to liberate ourselves from the. Can
I ask you a question? Could I just ask you a question? Do you go to work?
Yeah, I work for the RCP. This is my job. It's trying to build a revolutionary party to channel all of the anger that people feel against billionaires, against the capitalist system, and channel it into a force that can actually. I'm going to be honest with you.
I want to employ you because I think you're a professional troublemaker. I don't think that you're helping the situation. I'm being honest with you. I would employ.
I think you are being honest.
You're a professional troublemaker. Rather than trying to all work together, you've got this thing that, everybody treats workers bad and workers are not being respected. I mean, anyhow, that's my view on it. Anyhow.
Well, let me put this to you then, Charlie, because there are some other economists, not Fiona, in the UK that have argued that this growing wealth gap in the UK should be considered alongside climate change and terrorism as risks to national security. So what do you make of that?
I'm sure they may be right, but I'll be a bit more worried about terrorism than billionaires.
But if they're worried that the wealth gap is causing such discontent in society, as perhaps Fiona has expressed, that this is so serious, it's a national security risk.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they sit there all day coming up with them things. So if that's how they see it, that's how they see it. I'm not going to totally disagree with it, but I still say that we'll be worse off without people that create jobs and people that invest back into the country and people that train people. That's the point I'm saying. I mean, if they're coming up that it's a real risk, but I'd rather face this problem than terrorists. I'm not so sure about this climate business, but, I think it's the terrorists that's the one I'd be more concerned about. I wouldn't be worried about some guy, working harder and employ more people and contribute more to society.
Fiona, final word from you on that question. Is the wage gap a national security risk?
I think it's a risk for one group of people, and that's the ruling class, right? I think that some of them can see, as you said earlier, that there is a brewing anger growing in society. The problem is, where is that anger going to go? You know, a lot of this anti-rich sentiment can be weaponized, I would say, by right-wing demagogues like Nigel Farage, who use the anger that exists in society and channel it. They scapegoat migrants, for example, and say the reason your life is getting harder is because of asylum seekers or it's because of migrants. I'm here to say, no, it's because of the way the capitalist system is set up, it's because of the super rich, and it's because of billionaires. And I hope that I can get my ideas out there to those who are willing to listen in a stronger way. Because without that, Britain is a tinderbox that is waiting to explode. I just need to make sure that that explosion is against the capitalist system itself so that we can actually solve the problems in people's lives. And that can only come about through socialism.
It's been a very interesting debate, hearing two incredibly diverse points of view. I really appreciate both of you putting your beliefs on the line there here on Counterpoints. Fiona Lali, political activist and member of the British Revolutionary Communist Party, and Charlie Mullins, British entrepreneur and businessman. Thank you both very much for your insights here on Counterpoints. And thank you to you for tuning in to this episode of Counterpoints. You can, of course, keep up to date with our latest debates and interviews by subscribing to Al Arabiya English on YouTube. And don't forget, follow us on X and TikTok. We'll see you next time.